Imagine this. A 24-year-old man wakes up one morning and realizes he controls the entire world. Not a kingdom, not a country. The entire known world. Rome, Egypt, Greece, half of Europe, all of it, his. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus. But history remembers him by his nickname, a nickname his father's soldiers gave him when he was just a toddler running around military camps in tiny little boots. They called him Caligula, Little Boots. And within 4 years, he would become the most feared, hated, and misunderstood man in human history. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Almost everything you know about Caligula is probably a lie. So, who exactly was Caligula? To understand the man, you have to understand the world he was born into. The year is 12 AD. Rome is no longer a republic, it's an empire. And empires need emperors. Caligula's great-grandfather was Julius Caesar. His adoptive great-grandfather was Augustus, the man who literally invented the Roman Empire. His father, Germanicus, was the most beloved general in Rome, a war hero, a man of the people, the kind of person crowds would follow anywhere. Caligula grew up on military campaigns. As a little boy, he marched with legions. He ate with soldiers. He slept in tents. The troops adored him. This tiny kid running around in a miniature soldier's uniform with little boots to match. That's where the nickname came from, Caligula, Little Boots. He thought it was embarrassing, by the way. He hated that nickname his entire life. But then everything fell apart. His father died under mysterious circumstances, possibly poisoned by enemies of the family. His mother was exiled by the Emperor Tiberius, a paranoid, bitter old man who saw threats everywhere. 2 of his brothers were killed or driven to suicide. Caligula was alone, surrounded by the man who destroyed his family. For years, he lived under Tiberius on the Island of Capri, essentially a prisoner with a nice view. He watched, he waited, he said nothing. He smiled at the man who murdered his family. One ancient writer said this about him: "Never was there a better slave or a worse master." And then, in 37 AD, Tiberius died. Caligula was 24 years old, and the whole world was watching. When Caligula stepped into power, Rome went absolutely insane. With joy, people flooded the streets. Strangers hugged each other. Animals were sacrificed by the thousands in celebration. One ancient source claims that in the first 3 months of his reign, over 160,000 animals were slaughtered as offerings to the gods. That's how desperately people wanted Tiberius gone. And Caligula? He delivered. In his first acts as emperor, he freed political prisoners. He cancelled unfair taxes. He published the imperial budget, something Tiberius had kept completely secret, so that every Roman citizen could see exactly where their money was going. He brought back democratic elections. He gave bonuses to the army. He threw lavish games and spectacles for the public, free food, free entertainment, free everything. The Senate loved him. The army loved him. The people loved him. They called him their star, their baby, their chick. One senator reportedly said he was the answer to every Roman's prayer. For the first 7 months, Caligula was, by every measure, a great emperor. And then he got sick. In October of 37 AD, Caligula collapsed. A devastating fever took hold of him. So severe that at one point, nobody thought he would survive. All of Rome held its breath. People fasted, they prayed, they offered their own lives to the gods in exchange for his. He survived, but something was different. The man who walked out of that sickbed was not the same man who had walked in. Within weeks, the executions began. His cousin, dead. His father-in-law, dead. His former ally Macro, the man who helped him become emperor, dead. The generous, beloved young emperor was gone. And in his place, something else had arrived. So what actually happened to Caligula? Historians have been arguing about this for 2,000 years, and honestly, they still don't agree. The ancient sources, writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, paint a picture of a monster, a madman, a man who declared himself a living god, who built a bridge of boats across the Bay of Naples just to ride across it on a horse, because a fortune teller once told him he had as much chance of becoming emperor as he did of riding a horse across that bay. A man who reportedly made his horse a consul. A man who would execute people for sport, who humiliated senators by making them run beside his chariot for miles, who threw audience members into the arena when he ran out of criminals to feed to the animals. Terrible, monstrous, insane. But here's where it gets interesting. Almost every single one of these stories comes from sources written after his death, written by people who hated him, written by senators whose class he humiliated and whose power he stripped away. Suetonius wrote about Caligula over 80 years after he died. Cassius Dio wrote about him nearly 200 years later. Think about that for a second. Imagine someone writing a biography of you 200 years from now, using only the accounts of your worst enemies. How accurate do you think that would be? The truth is, we don't actually know how much of it is real. What we do know is this: Caligula genuinely believed he was a god. He dressed as Jupiter, as Mercury, as Venus. He demanded to be worshipped. He had a temple built in his own honor. Was that madness, or was it politics? Because here's the thing, in Egypt, in the eastern provinces, rulers being gods was completely normal. Augustus himself had been worshipped as a divine figure in parts of the empire. Maybe Caligula wasn't crazy. Maybe he was just playing a different game, a game the Roman Senate refused to understand. Or maybe the fever really did break something inside him. Maybe the trauma of watching his entire family get destroyed, his father poisoned, his mother exiled, his brothers killed. Maybe all of that finally caught up with him. We will never know for certain. And that is exactly what makes him so fascinating. By 41 AD, Caligula had made a lot of enemies. Not just political enemies, personal ones, dangerous ones. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers whose entire purpose was to protect the emperor, had grown tired of him. The Senate had grown tired of him. Even members of his own household were done. And in January of 41 AD, they decided to act. The plot was led by a man named Cassius Chaerea, a senior officer of the Praetorian Guard, a decorated soldier, a man Caligula had publicly humiliated over and over again. Caligula liked to mock him, called him weak, called him soft, made obscene gestures when giving him the daily password in front of everyone. You don't do that to a man with a sword. On the 24th of January, 41 AD, Caligula was attending a private performance in a palace corridor. When Cassius Chaerea stepped in front of him, he asked Caligula for the day's password. Caligula gave him a mocking answer. Chaerea drew his sword and struck him in the jaw. What followed was not clean. It was not quick. Multiple guards joined in. Caligula was struck 30 times before it was over. He was 28 years old. Rome's reaction was complicated. Some people mourned, genuinely. They had loved the young emperor from the beginning and never stopped. Others celebrated in the streets. The Senate immediately met and did something extraordinary. They voted to erase Caligula from history entirely. His statues were torn down. His name was chiseled off public monuments. His coins were melted, his records destroyed. The Romans called this damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, the ultimate punishment, not just death, but erasure. And yet, here we are, 2,000 years later, still talking about him, still arguing about whether he was a monster or a victim, a madman or a misunderstood reformer, a god, or just a broken young man who never stood a chance. Maybe that's the most Roman thing about him. You can tear down the statues, you can melt the coins, you can chisel the name off every monument in the empire, but you cannot kill a story. Caligula is proof of that. So, was Caligula insane? After everything we've covered, I'm not going to give you a clean answer because history doesn't work that way. What I will tell you is this. A boy watched his entire family get destroyed before he turned 20. He spent years smiling at the man who did it. He rose to the most powerful position in the known world at 24. He got sick, and something shifted. And 4 years later, he was dead on a corridor floor with 30 stab wounds. Was he a monster? Maybe. Was he a victim? Also, maybe. Was he a god? He certainly thought so, but here's what nobody can take away from him. In 2,000 years of human history, nobody forgot his name. Not the Senate who erased him, not the historians who despised him, not the empire that outlived him by 400 years, 2,000 years later. You just spent 12 minutes learning about a man Rome tried to erase from existence. I'd call that a win for Caligula. If you want to know what happened next, who replaced him, how Rome recovered, and what the empire looked like in the decades that followed, that's exactly what we're covering in the next video. Because this is just the beginning. Europe's first century had a lot more chaos, a lot more blood, and a lot more stories that history almost forgot. And we're going to find every single one of them. If this video made you think, subscribe. Because next time we're going somewhere even darker. See you there.